Folks at home, welcome back to the Crimson Oak Pond, and today marks the 3-year anniversary of the 5-acre pond build and when we added those initial bass. And since it's basically the birthday of those original tiger bass we stocked, it's the perfect time to look back and see how they went from these little 2-inch fingerlings and grew into some beautiful, chunky, adult largemouth bass. And you can tell some of them have eaten more than others. But I'll always find it amazing that the day that we stocked the pond, we fit every single one of those 2-inch bass in a 5-gallon bucket when we were releasing them into the pond. And today, you may have a tough time fitting one of these bass into a 5-gallon bucket. But over the years, we've documented the aggression of these bass as well as their big appetites. And I'm pretty happy with the results as we've got several bass over 5 pounds and a couple over 7 pounds. So now let's take a look at some of the successes and failures over the past 3 years. So the number one priority for us was having an abundance of forage. And that primarily consisted of threadfin shad, jumbo freshwater prawns, which are basically a big shrimp, adult golden shiners, as well as tilapia. And you all have probably heard me say that a bass has to eat 10 pounds of forage to gain 1 pound. And that means that just 3 of these bigger bass will have eaten nearly 200 pounds of forage all by themselves. So if you did the math with hundreds of bass, you have to keep a staggering amount of bait just to feed those appetites. And one of the main forage fish we started out with was the threadfin shad. And a big reason is because of their ability to multiply. So if you add 10,000 threadfin shad, after the spawn it can easily become 100,000 threadfin shad. And especially during that first year, this is one of those food sources the bass keyed in on because it had a smaller profile and was easily digestible. And each year we've stocked at least 2 loads of 10,000 threadfins, so they have played a pretty big role in getting the fish to where they are today. But one of the fan favorite forage types has got to be the freshwater prawns. So each year we get between 7 and 10,000 post-larva prawns right after the springtime, and we put them on a heavy protein diet, and within 5 to 6 months they're adult size and an incredible protein snack for the bass. So there's a couple of big advantages for the prawns. The first is that a bass wouldn't have to eat 10 pounds of prawns to gain a pound because so much of a prawn is pure protein. And unlike a crawfish with a thick shell, these prawns have a really thin shell which makes them a lot more digestible and the perfect bass snack. But the downside for the prawns is you have to grow them out for about 5 months. So the bass are only able to eat these for about a quarter of the year, usually in the fall. And after that water temp gets below 55 degrees, they can't survive. So we like to transport all of them out of the holding ponds into the 5-acre pond before that cold weather comes in. But there's no doubt about it, those prawns play a key role, even if it is just a few months out of the year. And one of the new bait fish we started introducing this past year was the adult golden shiner. And I was really blown away at the immediate impact and how quickly the bass put on weight after stocking them. And I'm kind of regretting not stocking these the first couple of years, but these adult shiners have a much bigger profile, and you can see when you add them to the pond, they're fully energetic, the complete opposite of a threadfin, and that big, long, slender profile drives these tiger bass crazy. We'll get to see the most action we see all year when we stock these, as you look around the pond, and these golden shiners are jumping 2 and 3 feet in the air, doing their best to run from these bass. But we've added these twice now, once this past fall and once this spring, and after both stockings we noticed an increase in weights across the board. So if you're looking to raise big bass, these adult golden shiners are absolutely something you should look into. And it's not just the bass that love them, the eagles also spend a lot of time pouncing on them in these shallow pockets. And next up is one of the most underrated fish that we stock, but still plays a very key role, and that's the tilapia. So we have to restock the tilapia each year after the spring when those water temps get up in the 60s. And the beauty of the tilapia is they can breed every 21 days, which is great because it provides a self-sustaining food source for the bass. And I love watching these overhead drone shots because as you'll see, these bass will swim through dozens of bluegills as they specifically team up on those small tilapia because they're young and slow and make an easy target. And thankfully the tilapia provide a good food source for a little more than half of the year, which is usually from around April to somewhere in December or January, until those water temps get too cold for them to survive. And when you combine the good reproduction of the tilapia with their big appetite for algae, they've played a huge role over the past 3 years. And you guys have heard me talk about this before, but one of the mistakes I think I made was adding the rainbow trout in the second year of the pond. And don't get me wrong, they could be an incredible food source for a bass, but I probably should have waited until year 4 or 5 before adding them, because rather than becoming a food source, they became another predator in the pond and began competing with the bass for the same food source. So while a few of these big 5 and 7 pound bass may have eaten some of these rainbow trout, I think overall it was too early. And last but not least, we can't forget about the dock feedings. I've got about a dozen bass that hang out right here around the dock that I feed some of those big adult golden shiners. You can see it's putting some weight on them. One of the second biggest bass in the pond lives right beneath the dock. We named it Ghost, and it weighed in at about 6.5 pounds back in March. But 3 years ago, one of my main goals when we built this pond was raising some trophy bass, and I feel like we've been successful. We had a few failures along the way, but overall I'm happy with the results. Now I will say that years 1 through 3 are always the easiest, and the next 3 years are going to be much more complicated because I have to manage the increasing population of bass while keeping a good balance of bait, and an aging pond can have water quality, vegetation, and oxygen issues. So it's definitely going to be a challenge, but that's what makes it fun. So now let's take a quick look at the 5 biggest bass in the pond. And just in case you missed it, we did an electro-fishing survey back on March the 17th, where we had one bass named Yoshi weighing in at 5.79 pounds. And one of the biggest bass that we had had since day one, we named the Goat, lost its title of biggest bass as it was only 5.45 pounds. And we had another fish named Kiwi weighing in just over 5 pounds. But the biggest bass overall back in March was named Junebug, weighing in at a whopping 6.72 pounds. And last but not least, we have Ghost, which had never been caught before and was only caught and tagged during the survey. But there's really no doubt in my mind that Junebug and Ghost are already over 7 pounds and well on their way to becoming a 10-pounder. Now let's head over to the other pond we call Cedar Falls, and it's my favorite time of year because all of the aquatic vegetation and things like the water lilies are in full bloom. We have a variety of daytime and nighttime bloomers, so some of these buds open up while the sun's out and the others open up under the moonlight. And in my mind, this is what ponds are supposed to look like. I love it. And speaking of big lilies, this is the Amazon lily, and a single lily pad on the Amazon can reach 6 foot in diameter, which is wild. But my favorite part about the tropical lilies is their contrasting colors. It's such a good variety of dark colors like the purples and the dark greens, as well as the brighter yellows and oranges. But something I'm thinking about experimenting with this year is putting some tropical lilies down in the 5-acre pond, because they're annuals and they'll die off in the winter. And if the lilies didn't make this pond nice enough, the waterfall puts the finishing touches on it. But now let's check in on the fish at Cedar Falls because we've got a lot to catch you up on. As you saw, throughout April and May, there was a lot of spawning activity, and that means a lot of baby fish fry. And I believe these are actually golden shiner fry, big heads and skinny tails, hanging out up here in the wetland filter. And this is the second time we've had a successful bass spawn, and we got a little school of tiger bass that are growing up quick. They like hanging out just beneath the Amazon lily, and so far a good number of them have survived. And check this out, a couple tilapia fanned a bed right here in the beach area. But the interesting thing is as they were fanning it out, they knocked a bunch of the sand down there on the rocks and then decided to spawn down there on that sand instead. So they basically abandoned the bed up top that they had worked hard on. But it's been interesting to watch these spawning tilapia because they're aggressive just like the largemouths are, and that they'll chase off any fish that comes near the bed. And I'm not 100% sure if the smaller fish is the male or female, but he's definitely the more aggressive one. And with largemouths, the females are always the biggest. And last year we only added 3 tilapia in Cedar Falls, but this year we added 6, and it's because I wanted to make sure we had enough females and males to get some successful spawns, because they've done a great job cleaning up a lot of the algae in this pond, and now if we just got them to spawn like they do in the 5-acre pond, we wouldn't have to stock so many shiners. But you can see we've got some aggressive spawning going on here. But now let's get an update on our boy Moby. We added him to the pond a few weeks ago, and it's interesting to see that he hangs out a lot right here in the wetland filter area. But what's really interesting about it is he hangs out up here a lot of times with a bigger female bass we call June. And typically when bass are in shallow water, they're thinking about spawning. And Moby's pretty much been isolated and never spawned before, and I would love to see some little Moby genetics spread throughout these ponds. So now that we've gotten moved into the new house, I noticed our front and back lawns needed a little help. Nothing major, just a few weeds and bare spots. And I've been using a product called Sunday for the past 4 years at our old house as well as the farm, and we've had great results. And Sunday made moving easy. We put in our new address, and it completely customized a plan for our new home and sent it directly to us. And if you're not familiar with Sunday, they're a subscription service that uses soil, climate, and satellite data to build a custom plan for your lawn. And you start out by taking a soil sample of your yard and send that off to their experts, and based on your soil and climate, they'll send you back the exact mix you need in these pouches to make sure your yard is looking great throughout the year. And the fertilizer application is extremely simple. I like using the water hose attachment. You screw that into the top of the pouch, connect the water hose, and then just give it a nice even application across the lawn until the pouch is gone. But they have a big variety of products, including things like this mosquito Deleto, which I think we all need down here in the South, as well as another product I just got done applying, the Weed and Green, which will prevent those weeds from germinating, as well as the Sunbelt High Nitrogen Pouch, designed for those warm season grasses. So Sunday takes all the guesswork out of it and makes it extremely easy to use with these pouches that connect to the water hose. So do me a favor and head over to getsunday.com/BamaBass and use promo code BamaBass30 to get 30% off your custom lawn plan. And if you missed our past couple of videos, we moved out of our old home, saying goodbye to our backyard pond, and into this new house where the waterfall's not quite as big as the backyard pond, but there are some good perks because it has a pool looking over a beautiful pond. It's tough to beat that view. But I'm curious to see what type of fish live in this pond and how healthy they are. So just like at the 5-acre pond, we installed a Texas Hunter fish feeder. And the thing I like most about these feeders is that they're solar powered and they have a built-in controller, so you can schedule when you want your feedings to happen throughout the day. And that consistency is what keeps the fish coming up to eat the protein pellets every day. Hey, we got one little guy ready to eat down there. So let's manually set off a feeding and see what shows up. I was a little worried about the gap in the dock railing, but it looks like we got it installed perfect. And I already got some turtles out here ready to eat. And a few bluegills mixed in. But I noticed that a lot of these turtles are the exact same size, almost like the Ninja Turtles we had, and they spent a lot of time over there laid out on that point sunning. And this guy's knocking the pellets down. But it's good to see the bluegills. Like I've always said, they're the backbone of any bass pond. And I knew that it wouldn't be too long before the bass showed up. Anytime you got the feeding activity, they're going to come by. So it looks like we got a couple of small bass here, maybe from this past spawn. But I do know that there are some bigger bass in here, because before we got the feeder set up, Oliver and Sarah would come throw them some cereal. And if you look really close, just to the right of that turtle, that big dark shadow down there is a pretty nice sized largemouth. Here's a little better clip of him. Right now he's just sitting down there on the bottom, probably waiting on that opportunity to strike. So now for a quick tour around the new house. One of the kids' favorite things is the jacuzzi, and it's the perfect spot to sit in and look out over the pond. Because each day we're spotting new species, and let's see which one of you has good eyes and can spot that blue heron in the pine tree. And we're still getting moved into the new house. Here's a quick shot of the office, where a lot of these YouTube videos will be getting made. And there's a cool shot when lightning struck the cabin out at the farm. So we've been busy with the shop build at the farm and all the moving into this house. But don't worry guys, we'll be back to our big pond projects here real soon. And I love that we got a few doves that sit up on top of the house, making their whistling calls right as the sun goes down. But now we're back over here at the 5-acre pond, and if you pay close attention, you'll see a big bubble trail right there at the surface of the water. And we see this all the time out on the Mobile Delta. And it's usually an alligator. As you all know, the gators can hold their breath forever, and one of the easiest ways to spot them is by the bubble trail they leave. So this had me a little worried, and up to this point we have not seen any alligators in this pond. So at this point I was really hoping that we would get to see what this was. And the nice thing is it was coming right over here to the shallow water right beside the dock, where that little tilapia is hanging out. So we should get a good look at it here in just a second. And it's Mr. Turtle. You fooled us, buddy. So this past week was the closest that we had ever had a tornado come to the farm. And while we were lucky that it passed over, we did get some very high winds from it. And this is the first time I've ever seen whitecaps out there in the 5-acre pond. But we hunkered down and just rode out the storm. I'm sure all the fish and wildlife were really wondering what was going on. But look at the trees back there in the background. It looks like they're blowing 20 feet to the left and right. And I'm not gonna lie, there were times when I was wondering if those shop doors were going to hold up. And then we also had another equivalent storm come through at night. And that's how it's been for us around here lately. We'll go 40 days without rain and then get a violent storm. I'm sure the wildlife hanging out down by the creek didn't know what was going on. Alright, it's feeding time here at Cedar Falls. And we're going to be adding 2,000 golden shiners today. And it's also becoming one of my favorite things to do because you're going to be seeing some acrobatics and flying fish. And I'll have to say that the majority of the fish in this pond are aggressive, but one of the little guys that's starting to really surprise me is the spotted bass. He's one of the ones you're going to see flying through the air, sometimes catching the shiner in the air before it even hits the water. But the thing I've noticed about him is there's no hesitation. Sometimes the other bass will huddle around, and then when they see the other fish moving up to the surface, that's what'll kind of trigger them to go into that feeding mode. But with the spotted bass, the moment that shiner leaves my fingers in the air, he's fully engaged and airborne. Gotta love it. Reminds me a lot of Moby. And speaking of Moby, you'll see him here in some of these feeding clips, but he hadn't got back to his full aggressive self yet. And I think a big part of that had to do with the week we added the tilapia to this pond. He literally exhausted himself by chasing the tilapia around the pond. I think he was either so confused or intrigued by what a tilapia was that he followed them non-stop and just wore himself down. So a lot of times I'd come out here and Moby just be sitting on the pond bottom trying to regroup and regain his energy when all the other fish are swimming around like normal. And he also hadn't caught on to the cues of feeding time in this new pond yet. For instance, a lot of times I'll acclimate the bait fish under the dock, and that lets all the other fish in the pond know that feeding time's coming, and they shoot over here ready to eat. And I'll see Moby swimming on the other side of the pond, not really sure what's going on. But if I had to bet, it will not take him long, and we'll be seeing those dominant Moby genetics here real soon. And another fish that's really aggressive, but in a different way, is the smallmouth. So the smallmouth is much more reserved. At the beginning of the fish feeding, he stays back in the shadows, and it's almost like as the other bass get a little full, that's when he really comes out in full force. And while he doesn't go airborne like the other ones, you can tell how much power a smallmouth bass has when he commits to the shiners and strikes. That's what's making some of these massive waves. But I'm going to be keeping a really close eye on the smallmouth here over the next few weeks, but I'm really happy with where we're at right now. So smallmouth bass typically don't live this far in the south because they don't like those really high temperatures. But I purposely went and caught Smalley in the wintertime. It was actually 16 degrees when we caught him. That way we could put him in a cold pond and slowly acclimate him over a period of months into those warmer temperatures. And no matter what species of fish you have, anytime you introduce it to a new body of water, acclimation is always key. And by giving him months to acclimate, I'm hoping we can be successful. Also having the waterfall, the big boulders, and the clear water really help out because those are all smallmouth preferences. They're sight feeders, so if we were to put him in the 5-acre pond, he might survive, but he may not ever be as healthy as he would be in a clear water environment. But the air temps have been in the high 80s and low 90s the past couple of weeks, so I know those water temps are climbing on up there. And so far, no signs of stress from Smalley. So that makes me happy. And now we're up here at the wetland filter, home of Truman, and I'm a little confused at how we have little fish fry here. But I don't think they're bass fry, or maybe some fish eggs that were brought in by the birds. But it's time to toss him in a couple shiners. Oh, he didn't see that one. They got caught up on the lily pad. Got him. But man, I love the way this turned out with the tropical lilies. So about a month ago, we visited some other ponds, and we sat down and talked with the pond owners about his successes and failures. And you guys really seemed to enjoy that segment and asked us to continue doing that. So I'd like to start adding a small segment into this series where we visit other people's ponds and share ideas from the cool things they've done. And I think it would be something we could all learn a little bit from. So for this segment, I was contacted by a new pond builder named Trent, who's in the final stages of a 2-acre pond build, and his pond build process has been very similar to ours. He didn't have good soil on the property that would hold water, so he had to haul about 150 truckloads of clay in to line the pond just like we did, but he had several questions around his dam layout, including his emergency spillway, and also some issues he was having with erosion. But as you can see, we're coming up on the dam. You got the vertical standpipe right there at the edge, and a couple things I really like about this build is he's got a really wide dam, which is going to give him a lot of protection in the future if he ever has flooding and too much watershed. Another thing I really liked is he's got a good buffer zone from the top of that standpipe to the top of the dam. And he had an extra long pipe going through the dam at about 200 feet, but he installed it right with the anti-seep collars and is going to put some riprap right here at the discharge. But one of the key reasons he asked me to come out was to talk about the erosion issues he was having, because he's got a ton of watershed coming into the pond, and with these big storms coming through, he's having a tough time completing the clay before it gets washed out. So we discussed a couple of options, and one of the options I used on my pond was to create like a catch basin or a drain in the area where you have the high water flow, and then pipe it down into the pond with a corrugated pipe. But since his pond is only 2 acres, he's considering putting a valve on it that will allow him to either pipe it into the pond or divert it away from the pond, which I think is a great idea. But him and his father-in-law have built this pond from start to finish, and he's right here at those critical last few steps and could use a little bit of extra help. So if you live in Baldwin County and do dozier work, can spread clay, or would be interested in giving him a quote on the catch basin and pipe work, send me an email and we'll see if we can help Trent out. But one of the best parts about these YouTube videos to me is that there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and so many of you taught me things during my pond build, so we're going to try to share some of that knowledge. But I think Trent's done an incredible job on his, and maybe we'll get back out there in a few months and give you an update once it's completed. Alright, today's project is going to be mounting the Crimson Oak sign on the front of the shop, but the first thing we have to do is install these LED lights. And it's going to be a little bit tricky to route them throughout the sign to make sure we got enough lights for it to glow at night, but also make it so that you don't see the light strips during the daytime. So it's not perfect, but we gave it our best shot. Now it's time to light it up. Lights are looking good. This is not the part of the sign you'll see. We're going to flip it over when we mount it. So I had to toggle through some of the different colors. We got blue, green, red, and just your natural white light. But also a big shout out to the guys at NRAV. I'd been hesitant to mount this sign myself, because not only does the sign come in two pieces, but it's got the LED strips on the back that have to be supported and holes drilled through the metal to power it up. And man, I love the way that turned out. Welcome everybody to the Crimson Oak Farm. So now that it's mounted, I wanted to toggle through some of the lights. I really like the way the green looks. Not too impressed with the red, but that's just the natural white. And I think we did a pretty good job with the LED strip layout. It gave it plenty of lighting, and they're also hidden pretty good. Now for the moment of truth, let's see what it looks like at nighttime. Another neat feature about these lights is it has a remote, and you can control the brightness. So I played around with dimming it a little bit, and we're going to save the red color for when the trespasser shows up. So if you see the sign light up red, you know you're caught. And I really like that green also. It gives a good, nice outdoor look. Last but not least, the blue. But I think the blue looks a lot better during the daytime. It's got that perfect amount of lighting and not too powerful. But I'm not the only one. We got all the wildlife pulling up to check it out. Mr. Toad. Even had Mr. Peter Cottontail come over here to check it out. I think he likes it. But this week we put the finishing touches on the shop build. I'll give you guys a full tour in the next video. Got one of those nice calm mornings out here at the pond. This time of year we got the Volcano Pump running from about 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. Especially while we got that nice thick algae bloom, just to make sure we don't have any issues with oxygen. But to be honest, I was happy when it ran 24/7. I really do enjoy the sound of it. And it must be the migration season for the ospreys because we have been seeing a lot of them lately. I think the eagles are about tired of chasing them away. It's a full-time job. And it didn't take this guy very long to swoop down and grab him a tilapia. And he landed on the duck house to eat it. So during the winter months, I'll cut the underwater green lights off. And I decided to cut them back on this week. And it's always fun to watch and see what shows up. It'll give you a good idea and a sample size of the bait fish that are swimming nearby. Looks like we had a successful shad spawn. And it'll also let you see how big the bass have gotten. Another nice perk of the green lights. So we'll have some more green light footage coming up in the next couple of weeks. Also have my little buddy Oliver out here helping me retrieve the camera the next morning. But this has been a record year for the frogs and toads. I've never seen so much reproduction. Maybe it's just that we have a healthy population of them now, that the pond's been around for a few years. But it's like every day we're constantly turning from tadpoles and leaving the water and hopping on the land. But it's a good thing they're getting out of that water because look at all those predators down there. We got a host of bluegills, a pretty big bass hanging out right there. We've even got the tilapia hanging out around the feeders now. But it happens 3 times a day. The pellet feeders go off and it is chaotic. And I find it funny that the bass sit here so strategic. They wait and wait and wait, pick out the right bluegill, charge it with a full head of steam, and most of the time just knock it out of the water and completely miss it. But one other thing to point out is that 4 of those 5 biggest bass that were on that list I showed earlier all came from around the bluegill feeders. 1 was from directly beneath the dock, and 3 of them were from this big bluegill feeder that most of these clips are coming from. And I think that helps confirm my suspicion that these bigger female bass in the pond are eating these bluegills and targeting these much bigger fish, as opposed to those that are just 2 and 3 pounds. I think those fish are targeting the shad and shiners, but you'll see some pretty big bluegills flying out of the water. And so as these fish start eating a bluegill that's a half to 3/4 of a pound, that gets them to that 10 pounds of forage fish mark pretty quick. And as we've traveled around and visited some of these other ponds and lakes, some of the bodies of water that had the biggest fish also had really big species of forage fish. And several of them had gizzard shad, which we'll be going into in just a minute. But that's why I think now that we're at year 3, it's going to be as important as ever to add bigger sized forage, like those adult golden shiners, jumbo prawns, big bluegills, and things that require little effort for the bass, but have a big payoff. But at the same time, there can be some risks, when adding bigger forage like the gizzard shad, so a lot of it's about timing, but what I'm going to base it on is the average weight of the fish, as well as video clips like these that show me more and more of the bass are interested in that bigger size bait. But there's one thing for sure, these clips sure are fun to watch. Now let's check in on the Squirrel House, and if you missed the last couple videos, the mouse that we call Gus Gus built a nest and had a few babies. Here's one of the babies coming in that we call Gus Jr., still getting acquainted with his new house and all the furniture. And here lately they've just been coming and going randomly. And look at Chip the squirrel coming back to the house. He's thinking, man, what a mess you guys have made. And then he said, I'm out of here. Even Gus Gus showing back up, seeing that the nest has been destroyed, and he said that's too much work for tonight. Chip with a scratch. But it's a good thing that Gus and the babies weren't here tonight because we had another cat show up, and this is the second time that a cat's crawled 20 feet into a tree to check the Squirrel House. Maybe they can smell the mice. Something brings them up here, but there won't be any Tom and Jerry today because nobody's home. And Chip finally coming back in, seeing if there's any leftover snacks. Maybe he'll clean the place up a little bit. And we had a new visitor. I may have seen this guy one time before. He pops in, checks the place out, and even got spooked. Alright, it's time to collect a little data. We got the pit tag reader right here. We're going to catch some bass, scan them to see if they've been caught before. If they haven't, we'll insert a new pit tag into them, but this helps us keep track of the growth rates of our bass. We're going to be throwing you typical summertime baits: big worm, chatterbait, topwater. There we go. Got him. Yeah, worm eater. Nice one. It's a young fish. May or may not have a tag. So this guy has been caught, 2232711, and it weighs 1.74 pounds. Alright, this fish is named Vince Gill, but I want you guys to pay attention to the bottom of this list, starting at Archimedes, because we named several of the bass from comments that you all left in the last video. So several of you joined the list, but we still have E available as well as H through Z. So leave your bass names down below, and we'll try to get 8 or 10 more of you added this next week. There we go. Yeah, right at the bait. Ah, he's turning. Oh my God. Whoa, pulled a little drag. Caught this one down in a deep hole. It's a nice fish. Alright, this fish has been caught, 2232807, and it weighs 2.82 pounds. And this fish is named Yoda. It's the second time we caught it, and the first time was just a few months ago, and it's gaining a little weight each time. There we go. Got it. Another fish hanging out down deep. Same pattern as last year. Well, this one looks like a 1-year-old. Probably does not have a tag. Oh, it does have a tag, 32303, and it weighs 1.30. Alright folks, it's going to be hard for me to explain this one. So this fish is named Nero and is second from the bottom, but if you guys notice, its name is red, which means that that fish was culled back during the survey in March. And the only explanation I have is that we left all the bass in a holding tank overnight, and somehow Nero was able to escape that tank through that top latch, which is pretty impressive. So Nero did not want to leave the pond. But after that, Nero, I think you're here to stay. Here we go, he hit it on the fall. Got him. Caught that one directly behind the diffuser. Male bass, long and lean. Alright, he's been caught before, 2233747, weighing in at 2.07. And this fish belongs to Paul Cafaro and is named Digit. It's the 4th time we've caught it, but unfortunately for you, Paul, you got another male bass. And you're not going to be seeing any of those incredible weight growths on Digit. Here we go. Big one. Oh, big fish. They're having wrapped. Still feels good though. Oh yeah, biggest one of the day. Running back out again. That's a nice one. Alright, this fish has been caught, 571506, weighing in 2.79 pounds. This fish is named Maximus. We've caught it 4 times, and I find it hilarious that the 3 times that we've caught it have all been on the same thing, a June bug worm. So Maximus has a picky appetite. There we go. Another good one. Couple nice ones right here. Man, almost identical fish. It's been caught 69589 at 2.75 pounds. This fish is named Xena. It's the 4th time we've caught it, getting really close to that 3-pound weight. Right here in late afternoon, got on that topwater bite. Man, love that sound. 69975, 2.24 pounds. And this fish is named Cypress, and almost gained a half a pound since the last time we caught it. Alright, we got the grill fired up. Got Oliver and Liz working hard over there in the garden. 2 peas in a pod. As soon as she can plant it, he can come through and destroy it. And now he's got his little sidekick Sarah with him. I think Liz finally decided to leave the last planter all to them as a little digging hole. Because you can see not many plants would survive in there. And now it's time to wash up. And one of mine and Oliver's favorite things to do in the morning while he drinks his yogi is to come sit down here at the pond and watch for the fish bubbles. He gets a kick out of it when he sees a topwater strike. But he's also getting to learn about all the different varieties of animals. And this little frog captured his eye. He liked the way he hopped around. But one of his favorite things to do is drive the players around the farm. So we ride around as much as we can trying to spot an eagle or a deer. Alright, now let's go check in on the summer crops. After we got all that heavy rain, everything's nice and green down here. You can see the sunflowers are sprouting. Here in a couple months, this field is going to be nice to look at. We also got the millet field that the doves are going to be happy about. Over in the bottom, we got corn and soybeans. And then up here at the top, we planted more corn, soybeans, and watermelons. So a big variety for all the wildlife. But speaking of wildlife, the raccoon is late for work. And he's coming through munching on some of the green crops. And then headed back home after a long day of work. But look who else is enjoying those summer crops. Peter Cottontail and his lady. But they better not hang around too long because we have Mr. Bobcat out here lurking around. So if you made it this far in the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow along with all the ponds, aggressive bass, and wildlife out here at the Crimson Oak Farm. But I hope you all enjoyed this one, and we will see you all next time.